Hello, this is Dr. Garret, Castleberry, Associate Professor, Program Director of Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University, and I'm here with a preview for our final guest interviewee in this section of COMM 4603, Creating Social Media Presence in Cultural Movements. Our final guest we are going to bring in this course, this semester, is an interesting fellow because he's going to bring some expertise from his professional realm that many of us probably have off our radar. But you know what, people? Quit limiting yourself. We are here to discover new ways that we can apply our degrees in creative directions. And so we are going to welcome in Brian Neff, who is a tabletop gaming developer, all right? And Brian has a pretty strong career working with a number of companies and organizations independently, has had his hands in entrepreneurial experiences as a kind of small business investor, but primarily functions, at least in one of our most recent conversations, as a freelancer, so that he's able to toggle between different groups, different people, different corporate interests, and often that flexibility of working from home at times. I know that's something that a lot of people crave today. Well, Brian was making that fashionable prior to any pandemics, okay? And so this is going to be a great opportunity because let me unpack what that means. When we're talking about tabletop gaming designer, folks, we're looking at not simply like fantasy role play and kind of like storytelling, but here's someone that is on the creative end of technical writing for multiplayer, multi-level narratives that have compound stories and kind of like plural. What do you call it? Outcomes. All right. So games that have a lot of thought put into them. Here's someone that's both has that playful side, but is also highly strategic in what you do. Well, let's think about this on another level, because I want to prime our questions. Remember, that goal is to get your question as deep and specific as possible, so that we're unearthing something new, not just hearing setting speakers up to give us really bland, generic responses. If we want that, I mean, we can just Google interviews with people that we've never been a part of. Here's a chance to do a deep dive. So if you haven't to this point, you perhaps do a little research into this guest speaker. And I've gone ahead, located some research pieces. I put those links into the newsfeed message with this video so that you can see here's a name that's out there floating in the gaming world, all right? And so just to clarify, we're talking about tabletop gaming, not video gaming, although perhaps he has some experience there and could at least has connections and networks in those communities as well. But let's say you've even, let's go to at a very basic level. You ever walk through Target, right? In those safe haven suburbs, right? And then you go by that area that has a wall full of miscellaneous cards, and some of it's sports cards, and some of it's more recognizable IP like Pokemon or Magic the Gathering, that sort of thing. You're going to find some more obscure titles, and these are often related to that tabletop gaming industry. Hey, many of you all were either kids, or you have kids, or you will have kids someday. And while you're walking around Target, you're going to stroll by the toy aisles. Well, just adjacent to the toy aisles, you're going to find this enormous wall. And that enormous wall is going to be full of, you guessed it, tabletop games of all kinds. And so whether you're heavy into games, occasional gamer, what have you, we can recognize this is a form that has commercial value, right? And so Brian's here to demonstrate for us how this can be a sustainable career path for you. So that was a little bit of a hype to set up our expectations. Well, guess what? let's ask questions to try to unpack what exactly that involves. And I can guarantee you it involves a lot of planning, preparation, communication, and organizational engagement with team members, company representatives, and so on. And so gear some of your questions toward those angles. Like, let's figure out, who does he work with? What are the stakes? What are the timelines of communication? How often? Let's get into those kinds of details, and we can really take away a lot from this interview encounter. And so some early career experiences. Brian, as you'll note in the newsfeed items, holds a bachelor's degree in communication from the University of Oklahoma. He was an active member of the gaming community, the tabletop gaming community in that town, a very, very prominent college town, and so was involved in that. Not maybe coincidence, maybe not. Also involved in speech and debate as a collegiate student, and so might be interesting to consider how some of those educational activities and curriculum tie into preparing him, as well as maybe some of that work. Now, Brian started out with a lot of volunteer work, and we've talked about the power, the value of being willing to put ourselves out there to build up our resume. And this included not just maybe running games at a very local level, kind of game night, right? But willing to invest in himself, going to conventions where people from all over are congregating, right, across geographic spaces to engage in their craft, right? Either culturally or with economic incentive. And so this is a way that he built up his network, which he may tell us about, but also your questions could help unpack. And Brian used that to deepen some ties. He moved down to the Dallas-Fort Worth area for a while, was involved locally in some upstart businesses, and contributed to DFW Nerd Night. That was a nonprofit that kind of had also a social media presence to continue that phrase we like, and was a part of their podcast for a few years, and then transitioned, right, moved up to another big market up in the Northeast. Took a gamble on himself, relocated to Boston, where he worked for a number of years, including maybe some local affiliates, but also remote work, as I've teased. And so here's someone that is willing to relocate, and yet is also able to negotiate some independent work schedule. So I think both of those viable things to think about when we're crafting our questions. Well, he's been involved in several projects, again, hinting at those projects in the notes, in the newsfeed. But some of the more maybe obscure, but maybe high genre, high fantasy minded games include Betrayal at House on the Hill, something like that, as well as Seafall, Charterstone, if I'm not mistaken, Mountains of Madness, which has a very Lovecraftian sound to it, Feuddom. There's some variations, right? I think there have been some, we're in that digital age of incubation periods being more publicly funded than privately funded. And so I do think he's been a part of a few projects that were kind of Kickstarter projects, that is to say, maybe publicly / privately funded. I have to think about how we categorize that. And so think of those kinds of questions if you can. Here's someone that when he's working on a larger IP or intellectual property for a big project with a bigger organization or company, tasks might include not simply writing and planning for the game, clearly a lot of brainstorming, but developing, there's the writing of maybe the narrative of characters, of, developing that almost like an author would write a fiction novel. But then there's also the development of the rules of the game. So thinking both narratively and strategically, right? This is to me, it feels a lot like left brain, right brain stuff here. And how does that gel? How do you bring that together? And perhaps we could gain a deeper insight into that creative process through your questions. And so it doesn't stop there. It's not just about let me go off to my cabin in the woods and develop this game and then sell it. You probably have pitch meetings. You probably have a lot of follow-up meetings with what we call like client management, right? Who the client is, the organizational client, and what it means to kind of engage with them in meeting spaces and meet their demands, understand their needs versus what you want to provide creatively. That's a really great place where we can learn about what this profession entails at the ground level, at the daily grind level of performance. And so I know Brian has been able to thrive in solo work settings, but this is also someone that has to do a lot of team collaboration, organizational group work, and that can be valuable for us, right? Because working with people is hard sometimes, especially if it's over ideas that we are passionate about. And so questions about those interpersonal dynamics could be of value. And we want you to research some of those titles and look into creative ways, right? It's almost like interviewing is not dissimilar from gaming. It's a creative exercise where we learn something, where there's some stakes or something at stake that we have a vested interest in. And so I challenge you all to close on a high note. Let's engage this speaker, Brian Neff, who's going to join us for our interviewing series as we close out COMM 4603, Creating Social Media Presence and Cultural Movements.